Hey, so today we are in part 2 of our margin series. And the underlying question we're asking in the series is simply this: is our attempt to get the most out of life causing us to lose our joy for life? Are we trying to cram so much into life we lose our joy for the life that we're cramming so much into? And the working definition we've got for margin is simply this: the space between our current pace and our limits. It's that gap, it's that margin between what our current pace is and what our absolute limits are. And what we talked about last week was, hey, we were created to live with margin, because it's in that margin we find joy. It's in that margin we experience some peace. It's in that margin we can have the unhurried time where we can cultivate the relationships that really are the most meaningful thing in life. And today, what we're going to talk about is time. And I think this picture represents the way that culture drives us to fill all of our time with some sort of activities. In fact, there's so much activities going on in this picture that it's coming outside of the circle, that not only is there no margin, we're trying to cram too much in. And as we go through life, it's so easy for us to live like this, right? To do this, to cram so much in. And today, as we look at margin, you might say, does God really care about how I use my time? What I want you to understand is He really does. And today we're not going to look at time management, or what people often call today even priority management or energy management tools. But even though there's so many great ones out there, because if you've ever been to a seminar where you've learned how to do time management, or you've read Getting Things Done by David Allen, or you've subscribed to the day planner theory, there's so many different ways, that what happens when you get taught this stuff is, unless your personality aligns so well with the person whose material you're reading or whose system you're trying to implement, that system is never going to work for you. But what we're going to do is we're going to look rather at a much broader, much bigger principle that I think is so much more powerful and so much more profound. But what we have done is created a little website. If you want to go to this website, you'll find some tools there. You'll find some stuff that help. There is a wheel of life there to help you figure out how you're tracking in different areas of your life. There's a time log there so you can see where your time's going. There's an ideal week. It'll link you to a message series we did a couple of years ago, called Restless. And this is, if you're going through life always feeling like you're in a hurry, that there's just always something else to get onto, I think this series will help so much. And as we talk about time today, I think if you're someone who's consistently saying, hey, I'm sorry, I'm going to be 15 minutes late, you're sending that text message, you're making that phone call, or if you're someone, as soon as you get in the car, you're looking at the clock to go, am I going to be there? Where am I going? And you feel that anxiety build as the time starts to get closer, or you see all those stoplights coming up in front of you and you realize, oh no, I'm going to get stuck in traffic. That today is going to be so good, in particular for you, because today we're talking about finding margin in our time. And this is vital because our time is our life. And I'd say the story of my life, or the story of your life, is determined by how I use my time, and your story is determined by how you use your time. As my time goes, so does my life. That the story of my life is really made up and come about because of what I spend my time doing. That's how powerful our time is and how intentional we want to be with it. You might say, does God care about how we use our time? He really does. And the reason for this is when we fill our schedule with things, those things can have a profound impact on the life that we live. You see, you think of a couple that's life story is taking them one way because they've got a lot of marriage problems going on. It looks like this marriage is going to dissolve. If that couple decide, hey, we are going to invest an hour a week in couples therapy, and over a long season of time, they go along and they spend time in counseling and they put into practice sort of the stuff that they're unpacking there, do you think that could lead to a very different story for them? Absolutely, because they've put it into their calendar. That if someone wants to get healthy and they look through and they say, there's 5 hours over the week that I can use to start jogging, or to get along to the gym, or to start doing something to increase my cardiovascular activity, do you think that person's life's going to look a little bit different, maybe 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years down the track? Absolutely, because oftentimes in the world in which we live, when something finds its way into our calendar, then we make sure that it gets done. And the story of your life and the story of my life is determined by the way that we use our time. And I'd suggest that the reason our life looks like that picture, where there's so much trying to crammed into it, is because we want to make sure that we make it one day. That one day we can get to that place and say, yeah, I've made it. And we want to make sure we make it there. Or we say, I want to get there one day. My life is goals to get there. But the problem with that is many of us have never actually clearly articulated where there is. We say, yeah, I want to make it. Well, what's it? Do you have a picture? And the truth is probably this. You're probably cramming your life with so much activity, you haven't got the space or the margin to do the reflective exercise to figure out what it might be or what there might be. And so what we do is we just think, man, if I can cram more into this time, more into what I'm doing, I've got more chance of getting there or making it, because, hey, the more I'm doing, I'm probably going to get there eventually. But the big hindrance here is simply this, right? We don't want to arrive there one day and realize we were in the wrong place. Or we don't want to arrive there one day and realize that we actually hated the journey, when life really is all about the journey. And so how we use our time makes such a difference, because how we use our time really determines not only where we get, but how we enjoy the journey there. In fact, a number of years ago, an Australian palliative care worker, Bronnie Ware, she wrote an article which she later turned into a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. Now, working in palliative care, Bronnie got to engage with many people in the last sort of 8 to 12 weeks of their life. And so as these people that she was spending time with, she started to ask them questions, and she started to try and ascertain, hey, what are the regrets that these people have got? Now that I'm engaging with so many different people, what a chance I've got to ask them some of the questions so I can shape my life based off their regrets. And as she went through this process of asking them over and over again, hey, what are your biggest regrets? She actually noticed there was a pattern, and she identified in this article, or now in this book, the top 5 regrets of the dying. I haven't got time to take you through all 5 today, but I'm going to give you the top 2. Coming in the second top is one that might not surprise you. In fact, you might have even thought this should be number 1. But that regret is, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Let me read what Bronnie wrote. This came from every male patient that I nursed. They missed their children's youth and their partner's companionship. Women also spoke of this regret, but as most were from an older generation, many of the female patients had not been breadwinners. All of the men I nursed deeply regretted spending so much of their lives on the treadmill of a work existence. And then hear this. By simplifying your lifestyle and making conscious choices along the way, it is possible to not need the income that you think you do. And by creating more space in your life, aka margin, you become happier and more open to new opportunities, ones more suited to your new lifestyle. She says one of the biggest regrets that people had is, I wish I hadn't worked. I wish there was more margin in my life. But then where it gets powerful is what her number 1, the most common regret was. And it was this. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. I wish I had done the things that I knew were important, that I had decided were important, not what everyone else thought was important, not what culture told me was important, not what everyone else was doing. How many of us are filling up our life with all of these things, not necessarily because we think they're important, but because of expectations that others have put on us, or maybe even expectations we believe that we think others have put on us, but they haven't even put on us, or maybe expectations that you've picked up through social media and seen other people's lives and comparison and things like that. That the biggest regret people had was that they wished they had the courage to do what they knew was important rather than living up to these expectations. You say, hey, where do these expectations come from? They come from everywhere, right? But I think what's interesting to think about is many of those expectations come from our parents. If you grew up with really successful parents, man, you get these expectations because you look at your parents and you think, man, I've got to now live up to that bar. Or if you had parents that were not successful at all, often you create these expectations because you've seen how your parents have lived and you're like, man, I don't want that life for me, so I'm going to create a level of expectation up here. And then if your parents are more run of the track, down the middle of the road sort of people, you often look at that and you think, man, they're so boring, I'm going to create a set of expectations because I don't want to be like them. There's absolutely no way for parents to win here. But there's ways we get these expectations put upon us. And the biggest regret of those who were dying was simply, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself. And so what I want to do is dive into this principle now. And what we'll see is this come back to us as we look at this principle. And I want us to dive into a psalm. It's Psalm 90. Most of the psalms are written by David, but this psalm was actually written by Moses. And to help us give weight to the words that Moses wrote, what I want you to do is understand a little bit about Moses' life, because when we understand his life and what he went through, I think it just adds a little bit more to the words that he in fact spoke. And Moses' life is often broken into three thirds. We spoke a little bit in the first week of this series because we talked last week about how the Israelites were living as slaves in Egypt. And Moses led the Israelites out of captivity. Well, the man that God used to lead the Israelites out of captivity, his name was Moses, and that's who writes this psalm. But the first 40 years, the first third of Moses' life, it was spent raised in Pharaoh's home. Even though Moses was an Israelite, even though he was Jewish, he got adopted by Pharaoh's daughter. She raised Moses in Pharaoh's courts. So being in Pharaoh's courts, Moses really saw the best of what the kingdom had to offer. He probably had anything he wanted at his fingertips. He saw how people ruled, and he saw what the high life was like. But at a point when he was around 40 years old, scholars will tell us, Moses saw an Egyptian mistreating an Israelite. And what Moses did was he actually killed the Egyptian who was mistreating the Israelite. And because of this, Moses had to run away. So he had this big transition point where he had to run away. He left Pharaoh's house. And what did he do? He spent the next 40 years as a shepherd in the desert. So for 40 years, Moses was looking after sheep in the desert. Now, you think, how much time would someone have looking after sheep in the desert? How much time would they have on their hands to think? To look back at life, to learn lessons. I'd say it's a huge amount of time. And what we know, because we know, or maybe you don't, if you've never read the book of Exodus, I encourage you to read it. But what we'll see in a moment is Moses goes back and leads the Israelites out of Egypt. When Moses was walking in the desert, he had no idea that that's what God had in store for him. He would have thought, this is it for me. This is my life. My life started in Pharaoh's courts. Now I'm out wandering and I'm walking in the desert with these sheep. But when Moses was about 80 years old, he had a powerful, miraculous encounter with God. And that's where God said to him, I want you to go back because I'm going to use you in a powerful way to bring my people out of captivity, to lead them out of Egypt and to take them into their promised land. And through incredible miracles and God's mighty hand at work, Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt. But he then spent 40 years leading them walking around in the wilderness. See, God's desire was to take them out of Egypt and into the promised land, but the people complained and the people did all of the stuff that wasn't quite right. So rather than going out of Egypt and spending a bit of time walking into the promised land, they walked around and they spent 40 years in the wilderness. And just as they got close to, as they're about to go into the promised land, God said to Moses, okay, Moses, you can look at the land, you can see the land, but you're not going to go into the land. And just before they went into the land, Moses died. So he lived a long life. He lived 120 years. Moses has got some perspective on time. He had some very, very slow years. I think he has a perspective on time that we might not have. I think that when it talks to how we should fill our schedules and what we should do with our time, Moses can really speak to us. And maybe you're watching this today, you're listening to this, and you're thinking, man, is Moses, I don't even believe that Moses, I haven't even got faith. Can I suggest just the wisdom of what Moses writes is so profound. I think you'll be able to grab hold of this whether or not you're a person of faith, because it is so special. So let's dive into Psalm 90 that Moses wrote. He starts off by helping us get a right perspective of God. He says, Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations, before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world. But before these mountains were created, before the earth came into being, you were already there. He says, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. From everlasting back into the past to everlasting into the future, you are God. You've always been God. You'll always be God. From everlasting to everlasting. You know, if we were to show that graphically, we'd show it like this. That from everlasting that way to everlasting this way, you have always been God. And then he shifts and he starts talking about people, starts talking about humanity. He says, you turn people back to dust. He's pretty direct, saying, return to dust, you mortals. And then he says this, and this is profound. He says, 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night. He's saying, for a God whose perspective of time is everlasting to everlasting, a human life, or 1,000 years of time on earth, must to you seem like a day. Because everlasting to everlasting, how 1,000 years is so small in comparison to everlasting to everlasting. It's tiny. And when we think about our lives, this is how we often think about it, right? Well, we think, hey, yeah, but some stuff happened before I was born. Yeah, there's some history there. But then there's my life, and my life's a big part of what's going on. And then after I die, yeah, there's going to be some stuff. But all the good stuff, all the right stuff's happened during my life. Well, what Moses is helping us see here is actually our life is such a small segment of this scale of everlasting to everlasting. From the beginning to the end, we are nothing but a sliver. And I think if we actually zoned in on this like 100 times, it would still only be that size, because that's how small our life is in comparison to the everlasting to the everlasting. And Moses continues making this point. He says, yet you sweep people away in the sleep of death. They are like the new grass of the morning. In the morning it springs up new, but by evening it's dry and it's withered. You see, Moses, who had spent time in the desert, he'd seen grass sprout up in the morning. And then he'd seen that hot desert sun come and wither it and kill it by the afternoon. And he says, our lives, in God's perspective, must be like the way that we see that piece of grass. It pops up and then it's gone. We go into a hospital now and we see her. She's such a beautiful girl. He's such a cute little boy. Man, they've got so much ahead of them. They've got so much potential. Man, they've got so much to look forward to. Moses is saying, from God's perspective, our human life is just like that grass that starts in the morning and by the evening it's dry and it's withered. Moses continues, our day may come to 70 years or 80 if our strength endures, yet the best of them are but trouble and sorrow. And that's Moses' story, right? He spent 40 years with the sheep in the desert, 40 years thinking, this is all I've got. That's full of trouble, that's full of sorrow. And then something incredible happens. He sees God do something miraculous. And then he spends another 40 years walking in the wilderness with his people. And maybe you experience this, you come to know this, that our trouble and our sorrow come. That there's a lot of trouble and sorrow as we go through life. And he says, for our days, they quickly pass. And then we fly away. And Moses writes this. And this is hard to understand. And this is a sentence that's one of the hardest ones, I think, that scholars found to translate from the Hebrew to the English. Because you read this and it doesn't quite make sense. But this is what it says. If only we knew the power of your anger, your wrath is as great as the fear that is your due. And when we read that and we find it hard to understand, but what I found, and the best way to understand this is, let me say what the author's trying to say here, just in a different way. He's really saying here, if we could see God as He is, we would give God the reverence that He's due. If we could see God, the everlasting to the everlasting, as He really is, we would give Him the reverence He is due. And the next verse is what I want us to capture. This is, I believe, where the goal comes. After helping us get a perspective of how small our life is in comparison to the everlasting, And hey, if you ever want to get a picture of how small your life might be, of how insignificant you might be compared to everything that's out there, what I encourage you to do is to go stand outside one night. Sit in a spa pool if you want and look up at the open skies and just sit there and look and dwell and think. And you can't help as you look out to the stars, as you look up to the skies, to realize how small we really are. And so with all that as a backdrop, this is what Moses says. He says, teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Teach us to number our days. Moses is saying, man, well, what we have to understand when it comes to time is that we all have a limited number of days. That there is a cap on the number of days that you and I are going to live. The number of months, the number of years, it's all limited. That we go through life often thinking that the number of days ahead of us are infinite. That I'm just going to keep on living. That the years are just going to keep on tracking up. But what he's saying is, no. What we want to do is number our days. We want to realize that our days are numbered. And when we realize and when we know and we internalize that our days are in fact numbered, we gain a heart of wisdom. Or you could say it this way: when we remembering that our time is limited provides us with wisdom to know how to use our limited time. When we remember that our days are finite, when we remember that there's a limit to how many days we've got, we start to live those days. We start to apply wisdom to how we want to spend our time on those days. Rather than thinking, man, my day's just going to keep going. We go, no. My days are limited. I can't get my days back. We start to look a whole lot more smarter at the time that we have. And what's interesting is that's kind of exactly what Bronnie found out, right? I wish I had the courage to live a life that these people are saying, now that they know their days are limited, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. So see, listen to what Bronnie wrote about this. She said, this was the most common regret of all. When people realize that their life is almost over and they look back clearly on it, it's easy to see how many dreams have gone unfulfilled. Most people had not honored even a half of their dreams and had to die knowing it was due to choices they had made or not made. And then look at this. It is very important to try and honor at least some of your dreams along the way. From the moment that you lose your health, it is too late. Health brings a freedom very few realize until they no longer have it. When they realize their days are numbered, they get a wisdom about this precious time we have on earth that they didn't have before. When people realize, when people know that my time is limited, they're so intentional and they're so wise with how they fill that time. What you and I often think is, my time is unlimited, so I'm going to fill it with so much. But when we realize our time is limited, it makes it a lot easier to start taking things out and to start saying no to certain things, because we know that our time is in fact finite. It is limited. And we have to understand and we have to hold on to this truth that our story, well, the story of your life, is determined by how you use your time. And the story of my life is going to be determined by how I use my time. And when I can just confront myself with that reality over and over and over again, that my days are in fact numbered, that there is a limit, that there's so many things in life that I can go back and I can redo. If I fail a test, I can reset it. If I fail my driver's license, I can rebook it and go and do it again. Even if things go wrong in your first marriage and it blows up and it's not pretty, hey, you can have a second marriage and another try at it. But when it comes to time, we can't get that back. We can't relive our teenage years. We can't relive our 20s. We can't relive our 30s or our 40s or our 50s or our 60s. Once that time's gone, it's gone. It's left behind. It's past. We cannot take it back. And then the way that we use our time really is going to determine the story that we can tell. And so knowing that each day I wake up, I'm starting a brand new day. That means I'm going to have to put a tick in a box. It's one less day I've got left in my life. Is knowing that and being aware of that going to help me to bring wisdom to what it is I choose to do that day? Will I then start to see some of the trivial things that start to fill up my day as being what they are, trivial? Is it when I realize that my days are numbered, I feel more empowered and I feel more confident to say no to those expectations that others might be putting on me, or that I just think others are putting on me. You see, it's such a powerful thing. And honestly, God cares so much about how you use your time and what you put into your schedule, because He knows that is what determines your story in the end. See, I shared a couple of examples at the start, but let me give you a couple more. There might be someone who's spiritually stagnant, who's just feeling like, I'm feeling stale in my faith, that things aren't going. Well, imagine if that same person decided to get up 20 minutes earlier every single day, and they spent that 20 minutes. So they might start that 20 minutes by saying, God, I'm about to engage with your word. Can you please speak to me as I read this? Can you please help me to learn something about you, or something about myself, or how I should be living? Please speak to me. Give me ears to hear what it is you're saying. And then they spend a few minutes really engaging with and reading God's word. And they take some time at the end of that to really pray that through and talk with God about it. Do you think that person's spiritual life is going to shift and change? Probably not after a day, maybe not after a week, maybe not even after two. But man, I'll tell you, if they committed to that day after day after day, week after week, month after month, they are going to be transformed in terms of their own personal relationship with their Heavenly Father. I think of a dad who's feeling disconnected from his kids. And I just think, man, imagine if that father could pick one day a week and say, I'm going to finish work early that day. And then every Wednesday, it might be, he turns up and he picks his kids up from school and he organises to do something with them. It might be take them to the park, it might be to get an ice cream, it might be to go home and watch a movie, it might be to kick a football around outside, it might be to throw a frisbee, it might be to go to the driving range, whatever it is. But every week he just finishes early that day and he does something with his kids. Do you think that'll change the story of his life, and in terms of the way that his kids talk about him and the way that his kids think about him and the joy that he finds in life? Absolutely, because he's willing to take that time and lock it in week after week after week. If someone wants to get healthy, we talked about that one earlier, didn't we? That time, it's going to make such a powerful difference. But maybe someone wants to see God move powerfully in their workplace. Maybe someone has a desire to see those that they're working with come to know God the way that they know Him. And imagine if that person can say, well, every day I'm going to take 10 minutes during my day just to pray for what God can do. And then they go and they hide themselves in a little cubby somewhere at work, and they just pray, God, I want to see your hand at work. God, I know that you can do something in this place. I pray you open eyes that are blind. I pray you open ears that are deaf. God, I pray that people will come to know you. I pray you can use me in this place to bring your light. And they pray that passionately every day, 10 minutes a day, day after day after day after day after day. Do you think God's going to do something significant, something so special in that workplace because that person prayed? Do you think their story is going to change because they found that time every single day to pray and ask God to do something powerful and profound in that place? I think so. I think that story could be so different. So let me ask you. What would it look like for you each day to remind yourself that your days are numbered? That each week goes by is a week closer to the end of your days. Each year that goes by is a year gone by that, is taking us away. I think of people who are trying to figure out what faith is, and I've seen people do this, and they say, man, I'm going to take 1.5 hours a week for 12 weeks, and I'm going to be part of a starting point group, and then I'm going to go along to that group, and I'm going to be exposed to the big questions that I've got to wrestle through in life, and I'm going to really wrestle with and ask, who is Jesus? Is He really the Son of God? And do you know what I've seen? People who have made a commitment to lock in an hour and a half a week for just 12 weeks. And some of these people, their eyes are open to who God is. And then they come out totally different. All of a sudden, their story has been totally transformed because for 12 weeks, only 12 weeks, to look at some of these big questions in life, they did that. And they found and they discovered that Jesus was who he claimed to be, the Son of God. That's the power of what we put in our days. So let me wrap this up by just giving you a little bit of homework, a little bit of evaluation. 2 stages, each one's got 2 parts. The first one's this. You need to ask yourself this, what do I need to stop? Or what do I need to cut back doing? What is it that I'm spending too much time doing that I either need to cut back or I need to completely stop? What am I wasting my time on? If I realize that my time isn't infinite but it's finite, what am I spending so much time doing that doesn't need to be done? That's trying to meet someone else's expectations rather than me trying to live out to my true self and be who you call me to be. What do I need to stop? What do I need to cut back? And what ties in with this is who? Who do I need to stop seeing, or who do I need to cut back my time with? And again, you're not saying people are bad. These people aren't bad. These people are just people that suck your time. People that you just always finding yourself with, but people that maybe aren't the type of person that you want to become like. They're the sort of people that when you're around them, they're not getting any better. You're not getting any better. They're just like this time vacuum and they're sucking all your time. Sometimes we need to write down these names, say, I have to intentionally pull back from that relationship. I have to pull back from that friendship, not because I don't love them, but because, hey, and given that I've only got this many hours on this planet, man, I can't be spending this many hours with those people. Come on, so some of you having names go off right now. And then you need to ask on the other side of this, what do I need to start doing, or what do I need to be doing more of? This is where we want to say, hey, what's important but not urgent? See, often we go through life caught up doing all the urgent things that we never get to the important. But what we want to do is make sure that there's time so that we can do what's important, not just what's urgent. So who do I need to start, or what do I need to start doing or do more of? What are those important things in life that I've let slide because they're just not urgent yet? And then who? Again, who should I be spending more time with? Who should I be spending more time with? Are there people in my life that are important to me, that matter to me, that I'm not spending time with because I've just living with the assumption that they're always going to be there because I just have this idea that the day's just going to continue. I'm always going to have my parents around. So it doesn't matter if I don't see them this year or this week or this month or this year or this decade because I'm always going to have my parents. But we won't. But for some of us that are raising kids, the day's going to come where those kids leave home. And we can think sometimes when they're 5 or 6, wouldn't it be so good if they could just leave home? But the reality is, those kids are eventually going to be at a place where they leave home. And our days with them are limited. Our days with them are finite. So who do we need to spend more time with right now? You figure this out. And I encourage you to take some time and ask these evaluative questions, because I'll tell you what, when we really live as if our days are numbered, we will have a wisdom to what we do that far exceeds any time management, energy management, priority management principles and tools that are out there, because this is so profound and this is so special. Let me pray for you. Heavenly Father, I thank you for every single person listening. I thank you that you have maybe helped us bring a bit of perspective to our life today. And Father, I pray you'll help all of us to have that wisdom as we go forward, to know that our days are in fact numbered. I pray you'll help us to answer these questions with a real sense of honesty. And help us identify what it is we need to step back from and what it is we need to step into. I pray you help us rid ourselves of all of these expectations that can come from others rather than coming from you and from our true self. Father, I know that if we're going to do what it is we need to do here, that's going to take some courage, because we're going to have to maybe pull back from some relationships and pull back from some activities, and we're going to have to give ourselves to other relationships and to other activities, and that's going to mean change, and change requires courage. So Father, I pray you'll fill every person with the courage to actually follow through on the changes that you are calling them to make right here, right now, and help us, Lord, to number our days. I pray this in Jesus' name. Everybody said amen, amen, amen.